Good evening, everybody. My name is Kurt Roney, although the lovely lady you see in the screen is not me. I'm not her. But I'm a professor of strategic management here at the University of Mount Olive in North Carolina, just south of Raleigh. And this evening, we're going to bring to you a program conducted by three MBA students, and in the absence of one of their teammates who cannot be with us tonight for reasons that are I cannot explain, but are completely understandable, and therefore by necessity I'll be filling in for him. But in any event, the program that you're going to see tonight is about PepsiCo and a strategic assessment of it. And with that, I'm going to introduce Erin Schultz, who and her brother is also with us, Blake Schultz. And Aaron or Blake will get us started and introduce their teammates, and then we can get this program started. And at that point, I'll turn it over to Aaron, because she's the lady you see on the screen right now. Aaron?
All right. Good evening, fellow classmates. My name is Erin Schultz, and I'm a member of the Pepsi company team. Allow me to introduce my fellow teammates. First, we have Blake Schultz, Michelle Casterman, and John Davis. This evening, we were presenting our strategic assessment of Pepsi Company. As the professor mentioned, due to unexpected family emergency, John Davis, who was responsible for our financial portion, is unable to present, so Professor Roney will be stepping in for his slides. So sit back, relax, and grab you a cold Pepsi product before So there's our slides. Perfect. So first off, if we could scroll down to the third slide. First off, I will be reviewing the turning points in Pepsi Company's history that have helped shape the company into where it is now. First off, Pepsi was founded in 1898 by Caleb Bradhan in the town of New Bern, North Carolina. Later in 1965, Pepsi-Cola merged with Frito-Lay, establishing Pepsi Company Incorporated under the leadership of Donald Kindleman, the CEO, and the chairman, Herman Lay. It was a marriage made in heaven, giving the consumers the best of both worlds. They had a salty snack paired with the best soda on earth. This helped lead Pepsi into one of the world's largest food and beverage companies. In 1966, expansion occurred and Pepsi enters Japan and Eastern Europe. In 1971, Donald Kindleman becomes the CEO and Pepsi modernizes its logo.
I'm sorry, I flipped that too fast. Pardon me. Just most everybody out there in cyberspace knows this, but his name is Donald Kendall, and I worked under him. So Donald Kendall.
Okay. I mispronounced that. I apologize.
No problem. Next slide.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
In 1977, Pepsi acquires Pizza Hut. The following year, in 1978, Pepsi also acquires Taco Bell. In 1982, Pepsi moved into China, and by 1985, Pepsi was in 150 countries. In 1986, D. Wayne Calloway is appointed the new CEO. Later that year, in 1986, Pepsi purchased KFC. In 1889, Pepsi enters India and acquires two of the UK leading snack foods, Walker Crisp and Smith Crisp. In 1990, Pepsi also acquires Gamesa, the largest cookie company in Mexico. In 1994, Pepsi introduces Aquafina. And in 1994 also, they partner with Starbucks to offer ready-to-drink coffee. This is known as the North American Coffee Partnership. In 1997, Pepsi forms a Tricon Global Restaurants Incorporated, which includes KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell, which they acquired earlier. This was in order to prevent the competition competing with its customers. In 1998, Pepsi acquires Tropicana Products, which was the biggest acquisition undertaken by Pepsi in the 1998. Later in 2001, Pepsi acquires Quaker Oats. This was driven by its efforts to obtain Gatorade, which they successfully achieved. In 2006, Pepsi acquired Necca Juice, Izzy, and Stacy's Pita Chips. 2009, Pepsi introduces vending machines and forms an alliance with Calebee Foods to sell food in Japan. In 2010, Pepsi acquires Pepsi Bottling Group Incorporated and Pepsi's Americas Inc. In 2011, Pepsi acquires Wim Bill Dan in Russia and Mabel in Brazil. In 2018, they are now under the CEO leadership of Ramon Laguarta, and the leadership is significant because he actually speaks 7 different languages, which was key because they are looking to adopt and move into expand internationally. So his pointing of the CEO is very pivotal into the Pepsi's new mission. And then this just shows you a picture of Ramon Laguarta, so you could put a face with a name. And then he's also accompanied by Marie Gallagher and Hugh F. Johnson and many others. As mentioned earlier, Pepsi has a dual product. They have a food product and a beverage product. However, Pepsi's product breadth is wide and is comprised of many different brands. Thus, Pepsi has a lot of different products offered, creating a product variation to appeal to the unique taste in consumers in different markets. This chart right here indicates that you can see that Pepsi's soft drink, and this is back in 2014, that you can see that Pepsi's soft drink and Frito-Lay share the greatest market share, while Quaker Foods only shared 4%. So that's just an idea of what the contribution to the market share of those products were.
Yeah, Quaker obviously was not acquired to get into the oatmeal industry. Quaker was acquired to obtain its beverage product. Help me with it again. What is it?
Gatorade.
Gatorade, yeah. And it's clear that that was the purpose of the acquisition.
Yes. So most importantly is Pepsi's mission statement. As we all know, a mission statement is a social economic contract with society. Therefore, Pepsi's mission is to be the world's leading consumer product in the convenient food and beverage industry, offering its consumers, customers, associates, communities, and shareholders unique opportunities and delight one sip and one bite at a time. Pepsi strives to provide a financial reward to its investors and growth opportunities and enrichment for its employees while being the best partner for its associates and communities. And their slogan is create more smiles with every sip and every bite. And moving forward, Pepsi's vision is to be the global leader in convenient foods and beverages by winning with a purpose. And in order to win with a purpose, Pepsi must perform they have a performance with a purpose, which is how Pepsi plans to move the company forward into a new era of growth and prosperity by being faster, stronger, and better. The next thing that we will discuss is Abel's model. Abel's model, which asks the question who, and that means which segment of society or market segments are being served. In the case of Pepsi, the answer to the question is that consumers of all ages who have purchasing power. Thus, Pepsi serves a broad target market. The second question is what? What are the unmet needs of those market segments? In Pepsi's case, the unmet needs are consumers' thirst and hunger, hydration, boost of energy from the caffeinated products, health, overweight and obesity, and osteoporosis. The third question is how? What distinctive competencies are required to meet those specific needs or unmet needs? In Pepsi's case, it's nutritional expertise, biochemistry, media advertisement, a strong distribution system, strong leadership, and sustainability. And at this time, I'm going to allow Professor Ronnie to discuss John's finding of the environmental assessment as he first takes a look at the economic trends.
Okay, and I hope you'll give me a little slack here since I'm standing in for somebody else. But in any event, these are the countries where PepsiCo does a substantial amount of business. It's in many more countries than these, but these are the countries that will figure in this analysis. Here we have a comparison of the GDP growth rates, and I might add this is purchasing power parity, GDP, which equates the currencies of each country based on their purchasing power, which makes them more directly comparable than if you don't do that. And you can see that the green line that grows the fastest is China's. And back in 2013, China's economy surpassed that of the United States, the blue line, and a year later, the European Union. And as you can also see, as time has passed, the gap between China's economy and the other two large economies on this screen has widened. Notice at the bottom, however, that there's a new hound in the hunt. India's economy is a lot smaller than those other three, but I don't know whether you can recognize it or not, but the rate of growth has picked up recently. So in the future, we will hear a lot more about India's economy. Smaller economies that figure in PepsiCo's markets include Russia, Brazil, and Mexico. And you can see that their sizes are in that order. But you might notice a couple other things. First of all, when you look at the largest of those economies, that being Russia, in the most recent year, perhaps a little over $4 trillion. If you look at the left panel here, you can see that right now, China's economy is about $25 trillion. So we're talking about large differences in the sizes of these economies. You can see something else too, and that is that in the case of Russia, and Mexico and Brazil, perhaps not to the same recognizable extent, there was a downturn during the recession, and you can see that also was the case in Europe and the United States. But where it didn't happen was in China. China grew right through the recession. Another interesting observation is Brazil, where you see a downturn, a severe downturn, just a couple of years ago. And that has to do with severe political turbulence in that country. Has nothing to do with the basic economic characteristics of the country, simply political turmoil. Okay, so here we are looking at spending power, GDP per capita. And we see a complete role reversal here. Now the top country is the US on the left, and the bottom one is China, completely the reverse of what we saw in the prior slide. And of course, this is because China's economy is still emerging and developing, and it has a lot more people, about 1.4 billion people compared to the US's 350 million. Over on the right side, we can see the other three countries that we've looked at, and you see that Mexico was slightly ahead of Brazil until that downturn that I mentioned earlier. And you can see what has happened to the GDP per capita or spending power of that country. Notice again, India is on the bottom, but right after that dotted line, the angle of the line turns up. It's much faster now. Here are inflation rates. Probably the most recognizable one is the purple line, which is Russia. And again, Russia's economy it is certainly not as advanced as some of the Western countries, but Russia's economy has been impaired by trying to think of the right word, but barriers on trade between Russia, Europe, and the United States due to acts that Russia has made politically and militarily that have offended the Western nations. As you can see, that inflation has come down in recent years, making it easier for people to afford PepsiCo's products. Here are trends in unemployment, and as I mentioned earlier, Brazil has been under a lot of political stress in recent years. During the last 4 years, Brazil has had 3 presidents. This October, there will be another election, and it looks like they're going to have another one. The current president in Brazil has about a 5% approval rating, so low that he's not even running for re-election. So we're sure to have a new president in Brazil. This creates an environment that's very difficult for companies like PepsiCo and many others, awfully difficult to be confident enough to make investments in a country that is that unstable. However, we can see that unemployment has come down in the other countries of interest here, the one country that still has a relatively high unemployment rate is, as we mentioned earlier, Russia. So this takes us to Porter's Diamond, the purpose of Porter's Diamond is essentially to assess the strength of a country's economy to grow, and particularly for an industry in that economy to grow. This was developed by the famous Michael Porter, the economist from Harvard, who determined that if you can understand 4 dimensions of an economy, the factor conditions, related and supporting industries regarding the industry you're studying, demand conditions, and rivalry. Strategy and structure are important too, but rivalry is really the one that matters here. Then you can get a pretty good idea of the prospects for growth of your industry. Here's a diagram that just summarizes pretty much what I said. There are a few comments I think that John probably put in here, but I think you can look at this diagram and get the important points from it. The most important points are, of course, that we have these 4 forces that determine the growth potential of an industry based upon the economy of a particular nation or region. So here's a scorecard of those 4 forces, you can see that John has done a real slick job here, not only by providing good quality assessment, but then by ranking the countries where PepsiCo does business, and superior growth potential, green, question marks that have potential with issues, and then one country, Brazil, that does not look like its economy is going to support this industry. One particular item that you can, I hope, notice, and that is the little footnote where rivalry, at the top of the rivalry column, and you can see the footnote that I put down at the bottom of this table. Unlike Porter's 5 forces, where rivalry drives down profit potential in an industry, when we're talking about growth and stability, if you will, creating a fertile field to plant the seeds of an industry in, you don't want low rivalry because that means there's not enough competition to improve the state of the art. But you don't want such high rivalry that it creates chaotic, destructive forces. What you're looking for is moderate rivalry. That's where we get the most benefit. And here we have a nice diagram to explain exactly how that works. One little issue I think that I would probably have with this diagram is the blue one on the right, the USA. I think probably competition or rivalry in this country probably would move that circle, that item down a little closer to maybe a 4 or even a 3 level. We've got a lot of rivalry in this country, more than Europe, and that does have an impact on profit potential. Nevertheless, he did a great job. Let's see, am I still doing economic interest rates? I guess I am. Okay, so we're now asking the question. Let me just check and see how much further I'm to go. Okay. And that is exchange rates. And John has pointed out that a strong currency can be very helpful to a country. It can certainly make the cost of imported materials that go into your product less expensive, enables a country to control inflation, leads to lower interest rates, makes it cheaper to buy foreign assets. But there are offsets to that, and that is that if you're exporting and your the exchange rate of your currency is going up, then it makes it more costly for foreign customers to buy your products or services, and that can impact the profit potential, especially of domestically based firms. Okay, here we have trends in currency exchange rates, and I'm not going to linger on each one of those. I think you can take your time to look at them individually, but I guess, again, these are exchange rates that apply to the firms where PepsiCo does business, and that you should refer back to this slide to appreciate whether these exchange rates are helping or hurting PepsiCo doing business from the US to a foreign country. On the other hand, if you're making profits in a foreign country, then the question is it easier or more difficult to bring those profits back to the US by converting to dollars? There is one anomaly in these charts, and that's the top one, the one on the top. I really wish that John had gotten a chart that extended back for more years than this, so that you could get more information from it like you can the others. But when we're talking about euros, the European currency, these charts express the number of dollars that a euro can buy. So as we see here recently, the euro can buy fewer dollars, which means that the dollar is stronger and can buy more euros. So in this case, if PepsiCo makes profit in Europe, it wants to convert those euros into dollars just as fast as it can, because the longer it waits, the less those euros are going to be worth in terms of dollars. When we look down at the lower charts and all the other charts we're going to see here, we're going to be talking about how many dollars the foreign currency can buy. That's the usual way that we express currency exchange rates. So in this case, in the lower left, we're asking how many Brazilian reals or how many dollars a Brazilian real can buy. And you can see that that was weak for quite a while, but now it's come up. It's pretty stable. On the other hand, if we look at China's yuan, we can see that today the yuan, the dollar, I've got that, I think I just expressed it backwards, but we can see how many yuan the dollar can buy. And as you can see today, the dollar buys fewer yuan. So to put it another way, the yuan buys more dollars today. Therefore, if you're making profits in China, it might not be a bad idea to hold on to them for a while, because if you can convert them a little later, you'll be able to buy more dollars with the same number of yuan. Here we have the trend at the top in India, the lower left Mexico, and the lower right is Russian rubles. But I'm not going to linger on those in the interest of time. So John's conclusions: China's economy, largest of all the economic markets that PepsiCo does business in. China's economy has been growing rapidly for the last decade. It surpassed the US and European Union. The recession certainly affected all of the Western nations, but not China, quite remarkably. And another comment that needs to be made is India, where we didn't see exchange rates. But India's economy, as we noticed earlier, is beginning to grow much more rapidly, and its GDP per capita, meaning which reflects the spending power of people's ability to buy products like PepsiCo's, has been begun to increase more rapidly. So as within the next 5 years, we'll see that India is a much more important market for PepsiCo than it has been in the past. My God, I'm still doing more. So Russian and Mexican economies, smaller than those we've talked about, but they are growing. Brazil's economy is growing, but it's got political uncertainties that make it difficult to do business in. U.S. and European economies are highly developed. They're growing, but not very rapidly. They're mature. China represents the growth market of the present, and so PepsiCo has become more engaged there. India, on the other hand, represents the growth market of the future. And that's why, even though it may not be such a large market for PepsiCo's products today, PepsiCo needs to be engaged in India and establish a position so that it can take advantage of India's future growth. On the basis of GDP per capita, that is the spending power of individuals, the more mature countries have the greatest spending power. On the other hand, when we look at Brazil, we see just a completely different proposition where not only has spending power decreased, but the quality of the economy has too. So PepsiCo's most attractive growth markets: the US, Europe, and China. Future growth markets for PepsiCo: India, Mexico, India and Mexico both. And certainly Russia as well. On the other hand, Brazil is at this time it's a quandary. It's not a good place to put new investment. The problem is that PepsiCo has already purchased companies in Mexico, such as Gamesa, a manufacturer of cookies. So PepsiCo is in Brazil. But it certainly would not be well advised to make further substantial investments there. 3 more slides for me. Okay, and this is simply because John prepared it. We're really in to the market assessment, and in just a moment, someone else is going to take over. We do see a very dramatic change in population trends. China, if we were to extend the green line far enough to the right, would turn down. China's population will probably peak out at about 1.4 billion, just about where it is now, slightly larger, and then turn back down. By 2050, maybe we'd be down around 1.35 billion or even lower. That is because of China's one-child policy. It's ended, but I've been in China, and I can tell you that the people in China the young people are very aggressive in terms of their business, their professional lives. And in the cities, they don't want more than one child. And so I'm sorry, I've been in Russia too, and that's what I saw. In Russia, what I saw was a declining economy, and therefore the population, because the birth rate has declined, and frankly the tendency for people to remain in Russia has sort of leveled off. Russia's population most definitely, and I'm going to get this right if it kills me, China. I mentioned Russia, and I'm not sure why. Yeah, in China, for the reasons I mentioned, the population will decline, and it's because people simply have not had in recent years as many children per family, and from what I can tell, have no intent to do so. India, on the other hand, has a birth rate per family exceeding the replacement rate of about 2.1. It's been much higher in prior years, but today it's about 2.5 children per family. So India's population is going to continue rising, and therefore there's no doubt about it. India's population soon will exceed China's population, and eventually some projections have India's population reaching way over 1.5 billion, perhaps as much as 1.7 billion. So in the future, the growth market of the future will surely be India. Since I used so many words getting mixed up between China and Russia, I won't belabor the population trends on the right, but again, please take a look at the y-axis, the scales, and you can appreciate the dramatic difference in the sizes, not just of those countries on the right, but the differences between their populations and the big populations of China and India. Notice one thing, which I tried to get into and so badly a minute ago, and that is that it appears that Russia's population is declining, and that indicates somewhat limited growth potential for that economy. And with that, Aaron, I'll let somebody else pick it up from here.
Okay, so these are just some of the United States population trends. So we're definitely getting older as a country. In 2030, baby boomers, they're going to be older than 65. By 2035, there's going to be less children than there are going to be adults. People aren't having as many kids just because they're starting to become a little bit more career focused. We are getting older. Population growth is pretty much going to result from immigration. If you can go to the next slide, please. So who's purchasing the Pepsi products? So typically ages 15 to 45, older adults, baby boomers, seniors. They're looking for young adults, pretty much everybody, students, young professionals with established careers, basically everyone. Pepsi has a product that can meet the needs of all their consumers. If you can skip to the next slide, please. So this is just a population density chart. It's just showing that there are more people per square mile than we have ever had before, and it's going to continue to grow. The density,
Sorry.
No, you're good. But it's progressed about 800% up until 2010. So it was growing pretty quick. It's slowing down, but we do have more people per square mile than we ever have before. Okay, you can keep skipping down. And you can go back down. Okay, so we're going to talk about some beverages and their trends. If you could go to the next slide, please. This was just a fun chart to show the soft drink in every state in America, what they prefer. If you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is where we're going to get into some some market shares and percentage of changes between 2016 and 2017. So between 2016 and 2017, I tried to circle, but if you look at Coke, Pepsi, and Mountain Dew, you can actually see that their percent and change actually decreased, and so did their market share. Gatorade took a really strange dip. And then what I also found interesting was Sprite. So Sprite actually, I noticed this later on, but Sprite actually went up, and I was thinking maybe like with all the health trends and everything, if people were finding out that there's like caramel color and some certain additives in certain sodas like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, I'm wondering if maybe that's why people maybe chose Sprite those years, but who knows. But water definitely increased between 2016 and 2017. If you could please go to the next one. So here you're going to see the volume of sales of beverages. It's in particular comparing carbonated beverages and bottled water. So as you can see, carbonated beverages are on a decline, and bottled water is definitely increasing pretty quickly. If we go to the next slide, please. So here's just kind of like a liquid refreshment beverage market growth. It is from 2014. It is a little older, but a lot of these trends are still continuing up until now. So between like 2010, excuse me. So you can see that fruit beverages, carbonated beverages, they have been in the decline, but you can see that sports drinks, ready-to-drink teas, ready-to-drink coffees, energy drinks, and bottled waters are definitely on the rise. If you could go to the next one, please. So here it shows the ready-to-drink tea and coffee market. It's kind of giving you an idea of the size. So in the purple, it has ready-to-drink tea. In the blue, it has ready-to-drink coffee. So this is obviously, you can tell that it is increasing, and it's going to continue to steadily grow. If you could go to the next slide, please. So here's a chart. It has the global beverage consumption forecast for 2021. As you can see, Asia, which also includes like China, India, Southeast Asia, they do have the largest beverage consumption at 47.2% as compared to the rest of the world, which is pretty significant. If we could go to the next one. So this just shows some charts from India, because India is pretty much a market all on its own. It's very unique. It's different just because of a lot of cultural differences than everywhere else in the world. But as you can see on this little gulp factor chart, it gives you carbonated beverages and bottled water. So as you saw on that chart of the volume and sales for carbonated water and beverages, or excuse me, bottled water, carbonated beverages in the US, the same thing is happening in India. They're definitely going on the upswing with bottled water, just because their purification systems aren't as good as the United States. So their consumption is definitely going to continue to increase. On the right, you can see kind of their most popular drinks over there in India. And PepsiCo definitely owns about a whopping 41% of that, or that's pretty much their share in the best-selling soft drink brands in India, which is pretty cool. We can go to the next.
PepsiCo has an impressive portfolio of brands. So we were talking earlier about the growth potential of that market. This is very encouraging for PepsiCo because it seems to have a very firm foundation to grow on.
Okay, so some of the beverage conclusions that we came to. Coca-Cola still ranks #1 internationally, just because of their marketing efforts, across the board. Pepsi is a distant second, with only 5.3% of the market share compared to Coca-Cola's 11.5%. In 2021, trends forecast that Asia, Latin America, Western Europe, North America will have the largest beverage consumption, which will mean these are going to be key markets for PepsiCo, and most certainly India, just because the population's growing, everything's just growing rapidly over there. Young adults are an ideal target market for PepsiCo beverages, just given that they contribute the most revenue as compared to teenagers and middle-aged adults. Ready-to-drink teas, coffees, energy drinks, bottled water, they've been on the rise pretty rapidly, and they're forecasted to continue to increase in volume. Athletic drinks, they're starting to increase, and they're just going to continue to increase, most likely moderately. Please go to the next slide, please. All right, so in India, bottled water seems to contribute largely to the market share over carbonated beverages. In 2016, total sales percentages accounted for about 23.5% of bottled water, 10.8% of carbonated drinks, and 25.3% of juices. Top selling carbonated beverages in India were Maaza, Bisleria, Sprite, and Pepsi. But as you can see, if you combine Sprite and Pepsi and a couple of the other drinks that were on that chart, they have a pretty big hunk of that market, which is pretty awesome. So overall, Pepsi ranks about number 2 in global market for beverages. All right, so next we're going to talk about bottled water. So bottled water is definitely something that's growing everywhere around the globe. So this is just a chart that kind of shows the market size for 2021. It kind of projects that it's going up. This chart shows the market value. So as you can see, the compounded annual growth rate is projected between 2017 to 2024 to grow at a rate of 6.44, which I feel like is pretty quick, and it's going to grow pretty fast. If you could go to the next one, please.
I think just as a quick comment, 6.4% compared to the growth rate of the world economy is one heck of a lot faster. This is an extremely fast growth rate for what essentially is a commodity. So bottled water, for some reason, just is a boom product. And sometimes it's hard to recognize a product category like this as being such a fast growth category because it's taken for granted so easily. And in fact, it's just a rapid growth product.
Okay, and I thought that this was pretty neat. It shows the bottled water market in a geographical segmentation. It has like the Americas, and then it has like Europe, and then Asia over here all together. But pretty much you can see that Asia it is projected. It does say down there 6.4% all by itself, which is pretty crazy to me. But pretty much it's going to increase everywhere. The demand for the bottled water is definitely increasing in the European region as it is everywhere else. If you could go to the next slide, please. So as with the increased need for bottled water, PepsiCo and other companies, they're definitely going to have to take into consideration what they're going to start making these bottles out of, because it's going to start to get expensive. So one of the key trends is to use biodegradable plastics in this emerging market. So the consumption of bottled water, obviously the packaging materials, there's an increased need for the packaging materials. So they're going to have to find something that's going to be cost effective and hopefully environmentally friendly, such as the biodegradable plastics. If you could go to the next slide, please. So this just shows the bottled water industry and how much it's worth and how much it's expected to grow. So obviously the last one was in 2017. But as you can see from 1976, the annual bottled water consumption has risen significantly, and it's going to continue to rise.
Pardon me, I have to go to the bathroom. That's my attempt at humor, all this water per person, you see.
I thought you meant you were serious.
I was like,
good, I got it.
Okay.
Oh, goodness. Okay, we can go to the next one, please. So this one shows almost per person how many gallons of water we consume. And as you can see, that's significantly changed as well. So demand for water is definitely going to continue to go up.
Oh my God, I'm sorry.
Pardon Lord.
Me. I hit the wrong button. Oh, please forgive me. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, you're good.
No, I'm not. I'm bad.
You're almost there.
Am I close?
No, keep going. Keep
Okay.
going. Keep going.
Yeah.
Keep going right there. Conclusions. 59.
Okay. Here?
Bam. There you go. All right. So some conclusions from the bottled water segment. The market is obviously expanding rapidly. It's expected to be $350 billion value predicted in 2021. To keep up with current planet-friendly trends, bottled water makers are looking to package products with biodegradable materials, which can possibly increase overall costs, for finding a material such as that. It's projected to grow at a moderate, not moderate, well, somewhat moderate, but rapidly in other areas of a 6.44%. Just in the United States alone, globally, it'll be about 6.6%. The global market is forecasted to reach a value of $307 billion by 2024.
That is meteoric. That is meteoric growth.
All right.
And we'll hand it over to Blake.
So not only is PepsiCo successful in the beverage market, they are also very successful in the snack foods market. PepsiCo is an industry leader in the snack foods industry with products in breakfast cereal, snack foods, and nuts. Okay, so when looking at this chart, in 2011, the beverage market was the majority of PepsiCo's revenue. But as we moved from 2011 to 2018, the snack market increased from 48% of PepsiCo's revenue to 54% of PepsiCo's revenue, which now makes snack foods the majority of PepsiCo's revenue. This chart just shows the type of sweet and savory snacks consumers are purchasing the most of based on sales.
You also might observe that PepsiCo, its big item is salty snacks, Frito-Lay.
Right.
But some of its international subsidiaries make cookies, for instance, the company in Brazil that I mentioned. There's another in Mexico that does as well. And it even in Europe has a division that packages nuts. So if you add it all up, PepsiCo is in a large portion of the snack food market.
All right. So this chart shown on this slide compares all the competitors in the snack foods market. PepsiCo is obviously considered a 10,000-pound gorilla in this market. This is a great example of how large PepsiCo is compared to their competitors.
Oh, is that it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
All right. This slide also gives a great example of how large PepsiCo is compared to their competitors. PepsiCo holds the most market share out of any competitor. And these companies are not small companies. PepsiCo is just so large. They're, expanding in every market and have a product for just about every consumer.
And here we're talking about just the snack market, just
right.
Snack foods markets, whereas back up here, let's see, we had snack foods on one side where PepsiCo held 37% of the global market, and over on the right side, beverages, where when you add the non-carbonated beverages and the juices and all, bigger than Coca-Cola. If we were talking about just the traditional carbonated beverages, Coca-Cola would be the 10,000-pound gorilla. But what's really interesting is that when we then go and take a look at the snack food market, suddenly the rivals are almost non-players.
Right. All right, so this map shows the global success of PepsiCo. As you see on the map in the blue, PepsiCo is the #1 in snacks in over half the world's snack markets. And on the bottom right corner of the slide, you can barely see it, but this chart shows PepsiCo's key markets. That is the United States, Mexico, Russia, Canada, United Kingdom, and Brazil.
Right.
All right, so this slide is very good. So it's very powerful to me. PepsiCo owns 4 of the 5 largest savory snack brands by global retail sales: Lay's, Doritos, Cheetos, and Ruffles.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, 10,000-pound gorilla for sure.
I'm so proud of those guys. I'll say it now. PepsiCo was one of my very first clients.
Okay, so PepsiCo isn't the industry leader in India. ITC holds the most market share in the country. PepsiCo sees the opportunities available in India and are looking to capitalize on these availabilities. This slide is also showing how the market in India is growing vastly. So the projected consumption rates in 2021 versus 2016 in India, China is basically said to be the growth market of the present, but as seen in this chart, India is the growth market of the future.
Well said.
The orange dots show the forecasted growth rates in 2021 for PepsiCo in each country. The growth rate in India in 2021 shows a significant increase. As seen in this chart, companies need to be in India now in order to exploit the opportunities of the future.
Boy, did you make that point right.
Thank you. Okay, so here's some conclusions for the sweet and savory snacks. PepsiCo has successful sweet and savory snacks in 3 different segments: breakfast foods, snack foods, and nuts. In 2011, the beverage products brought in 52% of PepsiCo's revenue, but in 2018, sweet and savory snacks brought in 54% of PepsiCo's revenue, which is now their key portion of their revenue. Most consumers in the United States are purchasing salty snacks, and PepsiCo has a great product line for salty snacks by acquiring Frito-Lay. PepsiCo is also the industry leader in the United States for sales in the snack segment. PepsiCo is #1 in snacks in over half the world's snack markets, and another list of PepsiCo's key markets based on net revenue. PepsiCo has the largest global market share over all its competitors. PepsiCo owns 5 of the largest savory snack brands based off of global retail sales. PepsiCo is not the leading competitor in the India market. ITC, excuse me for not knowing how to pronounce this, but ITC is the leader in India, but PepsiCo sees the advantages of expanding in that market and are going to take advantage of it. Overall, PepsiCo has held a strong market share globally in the snack and food market.
Anglicized, bingo Teddy Meddy.
All right, so now we're going to get into some health trends. We've seen this chart earlier, but this chart shows the beverage volume sales in the United States comparing carbonated drinks to bottled water. As seen, the sales for carbonated beverages are going down from 2010 to 2015, and sales for bottled water are going up, which could mean that consumers are becoming more health conscious on their purchases.
Absolutely.
All right, this slide here, from 2017 to 2022, this chart shows the global retail value growth of all beverages. Ready-to-drink coffee, bottled water, and sports energy drinks are the fastest growing markets. Carbonated beverage sales are slowly declining. I don't think they will completely disappear, but there will be less who purchase as we move into 2022. The popularity and sales of ready-to-drink teas and coffees will continue to grow steadily.
That's quite remarkable, especially when we remember that this is in the context of if you will, a health products trend or a health conscious consumer market. Ready-to-drink coffee is not what you would call a healthy drink. I might add that I'm an addict. I drink it perpetually, but as the fastest growing potential product, that isn't based on health consciousness. It would be really interesting to know just why. I mean, we understand bottled water. That's not too hard to understand, and sports drinks are not too hard to understand, but bottled coffee, good God, #1.
Yeah, people need their caffeine.
Absolutely.
All right, so from 2014 to 2025, consumers are purchasing more healthy snacks which may result in a decline in sales for sweet and savory snacks. Consumers are definitely becoming more health conscious, as said earlier. This chart shows that the United States is the most obese country in the world, with Mexico and UK not far behind.
Sad comment.
Yeah. And the reason for this obesity problem could be because the average restaurant meal today is more than 4 times larger than in the 1950s.
Wow.
So this slide, these are a few products PepsiCo is using to target the health conscious consumers. Their slogan is fun for you, better for you, good for you. So here are some conclusions. The United States is the most obese country in the world, with Mexico and UK not far behind. From 2014 to 2025, the consumers are purchasing more healthy snacks, which may result in a decline in sales for sweet and savory snacks. Consumers are becoming more health conscious. Carbonated beverage sales are slowly declining. I don't think they will completely disappear, but they will definitely be lower than we are seeing now. The popularity and sales of ready-to-drink teas and coffees will continue to grow steadily. All right, okay. So this is Michelle.
All right, so we're going to talk about some competitor comparisons, just the kind of the industry structure that PepsiCo is a part of. So if you go to the next, you'll see a beverage competitive map. So what this is meant to show, it shows similar products, by different companies, and it's kind of their market share of each of these products. So what the circles represent is kind of their size in these markets. So as you can see, Coca-Cola is #1 in carbonated beverages. Their circle is slightly bigger than everybody else's. But PepsiCo is definitely #1 in bottled water and sports drinks. And then Red Bull is obviously the leader in energy drinks. If we could go to the next slide. So this is the same thing. It just compares snacks across the board with PepsiCo as compared to other companies as well. Because PepsiCo has Frito-Lay, it's the largest player in the game for chips, hands down. That circle should probably take up the whole presentation, but so if we could go to the next one, please. So just some conclusions from these competitive maps. PepsiCo is definitely the leader in non-carbonated beverages such as water, juices, ready to drink, and then Gatorade is the #1 selling sports drink in this market. Coca-Cola leads the market in carbonated beverages just due to its widely known international presence in the global markets. Neither Pepsi or Coca-Cola can say anything for their energy drinks just because Coca-Cola did sell Monster, so they no longer have Monster as a product. And PepsiCo has AMP, but it's definitely not outperforming Red Bull by any means. Kellogg's and Mondelez, they definitely take the lead for cookies, crackers, snack bars, just due to their larger diverse profile and brand loyalty in those areas. But once again, PepsiCo is definitely the monster in the chip market due to having Frito-Lay. So here is a life cycle chart. There's different stages in the life cycle chart. It starts with embryonic, goes to growth, shakeout, maturity, then to the decline of a product. So PepsiCo definitely has a very, very diverse profile of products. So they have products in all stages. So what this means is they're actually able to have plenty of room to try to push more products into maturity into the market. So some of their babies, some of the things that are still in the growth stage would be things like Life Water, Kavita, which is a probiotic drink, Naked Juice, Sabra hummus. Other things that are definitely in the mature stage of the life cycle chart would be things like Pepsi, Frito-Lay, and things that are about to hit maturity would be things like the ready-to-drink coffee, Aquafina, but definitely these other healthier options that they have acquired can be pushed into maturity at some point to gain a bigger market share for sure. If we could go to the next.
Sure. A real quick comment here. if you're a brand manager or a marketing vice president, what you'd like to have is a collection of products at just about each one of these stages. Then your portfolio would be well balanced. When people look at PepsiCo's product portfolio, they kind of wish that PepsiCo had a little bit more going on in those early stages. I don't know, I imagine we'll see it in a BCG matrix, but when we get there, just notice that a large majority of PepsiCo's products and revenues come from products that are relatively mature. And the well-balanced portfolio has at least an equal distribution at each stage of the life cycle, so that there's plenty coming up the pike to replace the products that get mature and fall down.
Okay, so just some conclusions from these life cycle charts. In the future, you'll see carbonated beverages, they're going to steadily decline. Bottled water is going to keep continuing to increase pretty rapidly. We'll also see that ready-to-drink coffees and teas, they're going to be on a steady increase. Sweet and savory snacks will steadily decline. And then up and coming healthy snacks are definitely going to increase. As with the sweet and savory and the carbonated beverages, they're never going to cease to exist, but we're definitely going to see a decline. PepsiCo, they have so many products in all stages, so they have plenty of room to push some more products into the market into maturity, such as snack bars, Sabra, Naked, all of that good stuff. If we could go to the next slide, please. So here's the matrix. So it shows you the stars, the question marks, the cash cows, and the dogs. So the stars are things that are rapidly expanding. So I kind of threw Pepsi's little, they're saying in there where they have, they have the fun for you, good for you, better for you products. So I claim the stars as good for you. We got water, Naked, Propel, and Gatorade. So they're rapidly expanding because, as we said, healthier products, bottled water, sports drinks, ready-to-drink coffee and teas, they're absolutely increasing in the market today. Question marks, I said that they were the better for you products. So these are Pepsi's, new ventures, they're new products. So they've taken things on like Sabra, Bear Fruit Chips, Kavita. Then you have your dogs. Your dogs are what produce low growth and low market share. If you were to compare all the energy drinks out there, you would see AMP has a very, very, very tiny market share, very low growth as compared to things such as Monster and Red Bull. Then you have your cash cows. So these are the money makers. These are the things that have a high market share. They have good, steady growth. So things like Pepsi, Quaker Oats, Lay's. I consider these the fun for you products.
Yeah, the one thing about cash cows is that, in fact, they're not growing. As you recall, Pepsi's carbonated beverage sales are actually declining. Quaker Oats isn't what you'd call a growth product, but the Lay's potato chips, they have some growth. But the cash cow, specifically, has a large market share, but it's reached the top of the life cycle. It's not growing anymore, and therefore doesn't have to consume capital for growth. And when they make profit, that profit can then be thrown off as cash to provide funding for the ventures. Unfortunately, and I say that sort of in parentheses, the cash cow products dominate PepsiCo's portfolio. And so when we get to looking at sales trends, we'll see that PepsiCo's sales trend has been pretty flat for several years. And that's because the large majority of its products, in fact, are cash cows. If they'd been stars, we would see more growth. But what we see is pretty flat sales for the last few years. There are a variety of reasons for that. But the most prominent reason is that the majority of its products, in fact, are cash cows. That's a real strategic issue, and that's why I belabor the point. quite frankly, I intend to ask at least a couple questions about it in the exam.
Okay, so here we're going to do quarters 5 forces analysis. So what this is going to show us, it's the rivalry among competitors, threat of new entrances, bargaining power suppliers, bargaining powers of buyers, and threat of substitutes. So it basically shows if when you're looking to introduce a new product in the market, this is kind of what we're looking at. So how does this all play into PepsiCo? If you could go to the next slide, please. So rivalry among competitors. So it's high for both beverages and snacks, just due to a wide selection, and then customer loyalty to brands already. Threat of new entrants, it's low, just because in both industries, due to the high cost in brand development, customer loyalty is high, and switching costs are pretty low. Bargaining power of suppliers, it's low in both industries just due to the numerous number of suppliers, low switching costs, and forward integration is low. Bargaining power of buyers, it is high in both industries just due to the access to information. There are low switching costs. There are a high amount of substitutes available. The threat of substitute products is very high in both the beverage and the snack industry. This is just due to the amount of substitute products available in both industries. The switching costs are low, and there's also a shift towards healthier options as well. So here, I just made a scorecard for quarters 5 analysis. So 1 being the lowest rating and 5 being the highest. So as you can see, India, I highlighted them in green. They had the lowest average. So they are a highly attractive market for PepsiCo. Russia is mildly attractive. Mexico is mildly attractive. The US and Europe, they're more neutral, just because they have higher scores, especially in the rivalry area, and substitute products as well. If we could go to the next, please. So just some conclusions. So snack foods, the 5 forces are low. The beverage industry, they're high just due to the numerous rivalries and high threat of substitutes. Threats of substitutes are extremely high. The beverage industry, just because switching costs are low. The threat of substitutes is much lower in the snack foods industry just because of brand loyalty, but there is a threat there still. Beverage companies are constantly in a battle to see who can provide the best pricing, lowest production, lowest distribution costs, to try and gain a leg up on competitions, in restaurants, grocery stores, convenience stores, gas stations, etc. PepsiCo, they do have an array, a very diverse array of snacks and beverages that they can be released and pushed into markets to gain maturity. There's a lot of profit potential in countries such as India, potentially Russia, where the rivalries are less intense and markets are highly attractive, most definitely in India. We could go to the next one. So another kind of analysis would be the cage analysis. So what this shows, it shows international barriers when we're trying to develop strategies, to implement new things into these markets. So C stands for cultural, A stands for administrative, G is for geographic, and E is for economic. So as you can see, the higher the number on here means that it's going to be harder. The lower the number, it is going to be less intense. So for Mexico and Europe, I said that they were going to have less intense barriers for us to get through. India probably will be a little bit more intense just because of the cultural differences. So they're really going to have to try to find products that will appeal in their culture as well. If you could go to the next slide.
Yeah, I'd like to mention that, oops, I don't know whether that's the, that's some puppies. I think this is the only case where somebody used the cage analysis. Whether I would come up with the same ratings or as Michelle did is immaterial. The fact is she used it. I'm not sure whether the red indicates some sort of a warning sign since green is 10, but that's not like a stop and go.
I just highlighted them. as it being the lowest.
Just wanted to set them aside.
Yeah, I just wanted to make them stand out.
Okay. Yeah, the one of the issues in India, if I were doing this, I would take a look at the geographic item in India. One of the problems for PepsiCo in India is the difficulty of distributing products. And sometimes there are three different levels of distribution, from the truck in the city to the gets it out into the region, and then eventually in the city. There's a little guy on a bicycle that carries the product around to the snack shops and the little convenience stores. But distribution, because of the roadway system in India, is a big issue. Nevertheless, I guess the point that I wanted to make is to congratulate Michelle on using this model, because since PepsiCo is so engaged in international and moving into international marketing, I'm really glad that you used this model, Michelle.
Okay, so just going back, one was the least intense, 5 being the most intense. I said that India did have the most intense barriers due to cultural differences, and then obviously there are going to be some geographical challenges as well. If you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so some critical success factors that we decided on were Pepsi's ability for product innovation. They have proficient operations, distribution methods. They have a good global market position. They have a good global marketing capability, and they have numerous mega brands that have high recognition and contribute to a large portion of their revenue.
Yeah, now when we talk about critical success factors, these are the capabilities that are required to be successful. It's nice to hear that PepsiCo does well on them, but we use these criteria to judge the success potential of rivals, no matter who they may be. Okay. Uh-oh, I think this is me, huh? Okay. Again, I think because of the time, I'm going to try to go just a little quicker here. But the one thing you can see in this chart is the very flat sales trend since 2011. And as I mentioned in a comment earlier, part of this is due to the fact that a large majority of what PepsiCo sells is in the cash cow category. It's no longer those products are no longer growing dramatically because they've already saturated their markets pretty well. Now, there are other reasons, such as exchange rates, or in Russia, the ban that has been put on trade with Russia by the U.S. and the European Union. So there are a number of factors other than simply the maturity of the product line, but that's a big item that keeps the sales here so flat. And you can see in actually 2016 things actually took a dip. With regard to the increase in what is that, 2010 and 11, we're looking at acquisitions here, and I'm not sure which acquisitions those are. Does anybody know? I'm sure if John were here, he'd tell us. Okay, I can't remember which ones occurred in those years. The effect of declining or even flat sales typically is to depress profit margins simply because of the break-even curve. But in this case, PepsiCo apparently acquired some lower profit margin companies. Now, here I do remember PepsiCo actually bought in some of its bottling companies. This was to match moves that were made by Coke, and in the process, it took on a lot of business with lower profit margins. Bottlers don't have the kind of profit margins that PepsiCo's snack foods, for instance, or its beverages, its beverage concentrate, which is really what PepsiCo and Coca-Cola manufacture. They don't manufacture the product that goes in the can or the bottle. They make the concentrate that bottlers use to produce the product that goes in the can and the bottle, and that's very profitable. However, in 2015 through 2017, PepsiCo introduced a number of product lines that apparently added to the profit margins. I think also there was a significant impact of exchange rates here. I won't bother you with the break-even chart now. The purpose of this break-even chart is to explain why significant increases or decreases in sales volume can have an even more significant increase on profit margins. And that's because the fixed costs of being in business and the related expenses don't change with volume, at least not that much. And so when volume goes up or down, profit margins go up or down by a wider proportion. So PepsiCo's ROI it came down during the recession, probably due to pricing and have the need to cut deals. But since then, things have been going a lot better. Right now, pushing 20% return on invested capital, which is a nice, healthy rate of return on invested capital when you remember that the cost of capital is more like 5%. So if you will, PepsiCo could borrow money at 5%, get a 20% return on it, give the bank its 5% back, and keep the 15 for itself. That's not a bad deal. Return on equity is the growth rate of shareholders' equity. Let's see what John has written. Increased debt and reduced equity have increased. Yeah, in fact, PepsiCo distributed a large dividend and bought back stock right around when this chart started to increase. And among other things, the reason was to stave off the potential of a takeover attempt by investing companies and or rivals. So decreased the value of equity. And so after that, anytime the proportion of beginning equity represented by net income in a particular year represented a very high proportion of opening equity. So as the market began to take off, and as we saw earlier, as the profit, whoops, I'd have to get to profit margins, but as profit margins increased, each increment of net income increases shareholders' equity, and proportionately, it got up to a very high and unsustainable, because it's an unnatural level of over 65%. And so we've got a projection of that rate coming down, not because PepsiCo is doing poorly, but simply because the denominator is getting larger and shareholders' equity is being built back up. So a good year's income as a proportion of a larger equity base is going to have a continuously lower proportion until it gets back down to a more reasonable level. Long-term debt has certainly come up as a result of acquisitions, and that's what this line demonstrates. Shareholders' equity, you can see the annual dividend and share buyback that I talked about earlier. When the equity got that low, as I mentioned a minute ago, when PepsiCo's earnings started to go up, those earnings as a proportion of the opening equity were very large proportions, which will not be sustainable for natural reasons, not because PepsiCo isn't doing a good job. Here is the total capital and that simply is the sum of debt plus equity. And you can see for the past few years, it's essentially leveled off. Debt's gone down, equity's gone up, and so they sort of offset each other. And the level of invested capital stayed about the same. Leverage is an issue for PepsiCo. There's no question about it. At this point, PepsiCo last year had a leverage rate that is debt as a proportion of total capital, which is the sum of long-term debt and equity. When we add those two numbers up, PepsiCo's long-term debt represents 3/4 of the total. That is a large proportion. And as you can see, the forecast is that it will come down. I think this forecast was made by Value Line, so Value Line's analysts are simply drawing the logical conclusion that it's PepsiCo's management, just exercising common sense, is going to want to bring that rate down. Is this back to somebody else now?
This is me.
Okay.
All right. So PepsiCo's organizational structure creates a two-dimensional matrix and a three-dimensional matrix that intersect at the grocery store. PepsiCo is the. Hold on.
Sorry.
I'm on this one for a little bit.
I was too quick on the trigger.
PepsiCo is divided into three divisions based on geographics and products. PepsiCo Americas Food is a product division. PepsiCo Americas Beverage is also a product division, and PepsiCo International is considered an area division. The international division is, it's okay. The international division is divided into two matrices, UK, Europe, and Asia, then Middle East and Africa. The three market divisions are further divided into 7 regional divisions. Each regional division within the matrix has its own CEO. With this type of organizational structure, it generates multiple reporting lines of authority, which means more than one boss. Next slide. All right, so this chart here is a very famous model which was adapted by John Stopford and his partner Lewis Wells. This chart explains how companies grow from domestic to international. Companies they normally start out with an international division that exports, and the idea is to take advantage of surplus capacity and utilize the capacity more fully so the fixed costs get absorbed over volume. There are 2 ways for a company to grow internationally. One way to grow is to grow with more products. In Anzoff matrix, that would be called product development. The other way to grow is geographically, to spread out throughout the world more. In Anzoff matrix, that would be called market development. Usually companies grow in one direction or the other. So if they grow with more products to internationalize, they form product divisions. Divisions that are based on the product is what a product division is. Each one of those divisions are responsible for doing what makes the most sense to sell their products internationally as well as domestically. On the other hand, if they don't increase in the number of products very much and have a limited product mix, they can grow by locating operations in different countries. The responsibilities in that case will be the officers in charge of each company or region. That will be called an area division. What often does happen, as has occurred in PepsiCo's case, is that both growing by product divisions and area divisions take place. One of them kind of spawn the other until eventually when you grow in both dimensions at the same time, you sort of start bumping into each other as you see in that chart. And when you have a broad product division and area division, you've got responsibilities for both product division and area divisions, and those two overlap, and this is how matrices are formed, as you see on that chart. This is exactly how PepsiCo's organizational structure has grown. And PepsiCo has at least 3 matrices going on in their organizations. All right.
That was a great explanation of how PepsiCo's organization has evolved. Nice job.
Thank you. All right. So some of their resources, research and development resources and capabilities. Renee Lammers is the Executive Vice President and Chief Science Officer for PepsiCo, and leading research, discovery, and development efforts across product packaging and processing for PepsiCo's portfolio of global food and beverage brands. R&D is extremely important because our world is changing around us, and different products may need to be sold in order to meet the consumer's needs. PepsiCo focuses on refresh, reframe, and breakthrough. Refresh is basically taking an existing product and tweaking flavors, colors, or launching the same product in different markets. Reframe is taking something that actually already exists in the marketplace and creating the capability to move it to a different paradigm. And example of this would be a fried potato chip going to a baked potato chip for the health trend that's going on now. Breakthrough products would be products that take much longer because it's considered developing completely new ingredients, new processing or manufacturing techniques, new materials, biocombustible and materials, etc. These R&D facilities make this process happen for PepsiCo. There are 7 locations globally, one in Shanghai, China. The Gatorade Sports Science Institute is located in Brazil. And mainly PepsiCo invests their money in this research and development. It's pretty pivotal for to move Pepsi forward in the future. Next slide. Oh, these are PepsiCo's operands and operants. Operands are tangible assets that can be seen, property, manufacturing and assembling plants, equipment, trucks, and distribution operations. Operants are considered intangible assets, which you cannot see, but they're still there. Highly skilled management teams, product development teams, research and product improvement teams, R&D labs, and marketing and advertising.
And for a company's capabilities to be superior or to give the company competitive advantage, you have to have superior operands and operants that are well matched. It's the operants that activate the operands.
Okay, so this is me again. The reason why we duplicated the BCG matrix was really to highlight the importance to understand that Pepsi really has to take its objective and use the cash that's generated from the cash cows to form joint ventures and strategic alliance to promote faster growth. Michelle really highlighted earlier what each one was. You can see that Pepsi has very few star products, which are mainly the healthy products, and they have the majority of the cash cows. And the main objective here was just to highlight the importance of the need to use the cash that's generated from those cash cows to create joint ventures and alliances. So you can move to...
Okay, just before we move, here we have a perfect representation of PepsiCo's strategic objective. It's to get on the grow, isn't it? We just don't have that much going on in the star category. We're loaded with cash cows. I loved every minute that I worked with PepsiCo. Nobody ever doubted they were going to be paid. But the growth potential is the issue here.
Yes, so you can actually go down to the next slide because I just highlighted
I think I just did.
Oh, to the next one because I just highlighted that slide.
Okay.
Sorry. So really we're right here. We're going to discuss their functional strengths. Pepsi has a broad product breadth. That means product variations. And then its portfolio is highly diversified. It has a strong brand recognition and brand loyalty. It has an extensive global production network and an extensive distribution network. So those are some of the key strengths or functional strengths of Pepsi. Now, when we look at the weaknesses, we can see that the weak marketing campaigns toward health conscious consumers. That's an area that is definitely a weak area for Pepsi. And they have low penetration globally, and they have high leverage, which limits the growth and expansion. So those are areas that Pepsi should really strive to improve. The next slide is a CSF card, report card, which evaluates a business critical success factors. So I'm just going to highlight the main takeaways from this chart, or from this report card. The 3 companies compared in the CSF report card are Pepsi Company, Coca-Cola, and Mondelez. Among the 3 rivals, you can see that Pepsi is the strongest. And according to the CSF card, Pepsi's strongest CSF areas, which are the critical success factors, are media advertisement, innovation, and research and development. Consequently, Pepsi's weakest areas are its financial strength. Pepsi's growth has remained stagnant, and thus Pepsi is where it needs to improve its capabilities, is in the stagnant growth.
For sure. Again, let me just give you a quick compliment. This is the way you're supposed to do it. I don't think the other teams put the weighting in here, but when folks really use the CSF report card, which frankly is not all that frequent in industry, and it's because very often folks leave these weightings off. To get it right, you got to put some weight on these various capabilities. Some are obviously a lot more important than the others. So congratulations to you for doing a thorough job. This is the way a critical success factor report card is supposed to be done. This is a very nice job.
Thank you. So that really just highlighted the key points and takeaways from that chart or report card. So I think now this is going over to the next slide, to the goals and strategic objectives. And I think this is where John was supposed to pick up.
Okay, it's John's turn again, huh? Here comes John. John put that orange arrow on the chart after John got the slides this afternoon. Only this time John is Kurt. The rule with the goals hierarchy is that you can't put the priority on one level until you achieve the preceding level. That doesn't mean that when you're at a higher level, you can neglect the lower levels. You can't do that. This is a model that enables us to identify priorities for goal setting purposes. But it has a lot of impact, because if your priority happens to be on financial results or market position, that means that your strategy is going to be focused on those kind of results and those kind of objectives. As it turns out, PepsiCo, and you can read the details here, but PepsiCo has satisfied requirements of the first 3 levels. It certainly has acceptable risk. Even though its leverage is a little high, PepsiCo is certainly not going to go away. Its financial results are excellent. Its market positions some of its strategic objectives have to do with market positioning, for instance, in India, as we've already pointed out. But generally speaking, PepsiCo's in a very strong has very strong market positions around the world. There are some objectives to be set there. But by and large, PepsiCo needs to be thinking about what it's going to do for an encore, where it goes from here, with its product lines, with its geographic market positions, and so forth. So PepsiCo has satisfied the first 3 requirements. It does not mean that it can forget about what goes on with market position or financial results, but PepsiCo's priorities for strategic planning need to be focused on the future. Where are we going from here? What lines of business? What geographic areas? Where do we grow for significant growth over the long term? And that's kind of, those are the conclusions. So I'll go right down to long-term growth. PepsiCo's long-term growth will come from product diversification. And John has written some stuff about matching consumer trends, healthier beverages and snacks, foreign markets that are most appealing, and so forth. Here is a goals chart that John prepared to show the strategic objectives, the difference between where we were last year and where we want to be in 2022. In this case, it's a 4-year growth objective. Usually we would put 2023 and make it a 5-year objective, but that's fine. This time it's a 4-year one. And we can see that over 4 years, PepsiCo's objectives call for about $10 billion of added sales. That's about 16% over 4 years. And that's smoking. That's pretty good growth. That's fast growth in this particular industry. Calls for holding on to a 22% operating profit margin, a 25% return on invested capital, which would be an increase of almost 5 points. And as you will recall, I pointed out that the return on equity is artificially high because equity was so low after those dividends and stock buybacks. And so the result has to be a decline. What's remarkable here is the decline leaves them at still an extremely high rate of return on equity of almost 58%. I will be surprised if PepsiCo achieves that, but this is certainly a worthwhile goal. With regard to long-term debt, we come down a little over $3 billion. Equity is where we really smoke. We're going to retain earnings of almost $6 billion. That's going to be a 47% increase over where we were in 2018. The amount of capital invested, the sum of debt and equity, only goes up 6%. And so no surprise, leverage comes down almost 12 points from 70% to 58%. If I weren't here trying to give this presentation, I'd be sitting here just clapping and clapping and clapping because that's what investors want to see. They want to see a manageable capitalization, and if PepsiCo achieves these objectives, that'll be the case. Although, to be very honest, I'd still like to see it come on down just a little closer to 50%, and then I'd be real comfortable with PepsiCo. So let's see, I have to keep going here. John did a little editorializing, which is credit to him. I wish he were here so I could congratulate him. John took a look at the goal, or not the goal, but the projection of value line and said, whoa, hold on here. You're just asking for a little more revolutions than this engine can go. So instead of 75 billion, we're going to, he thought a more reasonable goal would be $72 billion. I think he's right on track here. In the operating profit margin goal, he says, no. You know, we want to make, we want a little higher profit margin. We don't want to slip back down. And so his goal shoots all the way up to 23%. Rather than dropping down to 22. Good for him. The rate of return on equity is the growth rate of equity as a result of retaining earnings. Not really a lot of differences here, but he's just a little more conservative. And I know, John, this is based on his working the numbers. So again, if he were here, I'd sure congratulate him. Return on invested capital. As a result of all these things, he says, you know, 25 is nice, but I'd settle for 24% return on invested capital. That sure as hell is a lot better than bonds, isn't it? If the interest rates today are 5%, you can get 24%. Would you do that? Yes, as long as the leverage didn't get out of line. Remember, we got to hit that leverage objective too. Otherwise, we've got to be cautious about investing capital. Nevertheless, when we do invest it, 24% or 25% is a whole lot better than chopped liver. And so here's what happens to long-term debt. Again, John says, look here, we've got to bring this thing down even more to a more satisfactory level. I think John's a little aggressive here, asking for $17 billion from $28 billion. I'm not sure I'd be that aggressive, but I certainly applaud his intent. The equity, the two projections are pretty compatible. There's a difference of $1 billion after 4 years, but it's not that much. Total capital is the sum of debt and equity. And John simply has shown calculations of what the result would be. Nice if you could get it. If you get your invested capital down that low, then the return on invested capital would certainly go up, assuming that the profit projections stay the same. I'm not sure John factored all of that in, but I also doubt that invested capital will really get quite as low as that red line, but he certainly has the right attitude. Leverage, hooray, we get down to 50%, just like I said I hoped they could. If John were here, I'd shake his hand and ask him if he wants to buy some more PepsiCo stock with me. So let's see, financial goals. I don't know that we need to go over all of these words simply because we covered them when we looked at the charts. I think that his comment in the middle about debt reduction will be a major goal. Value line forecast reduction of $3 billion. He wants an $11 billion reduction in debt. I don't know whether the PepsiCo's banker is going to be happy or sad, because PepsiCo's banker gets all that interest income from PepsiCo's debt. I think the banker would be happy if John would split the difference here and bring it in at about $7 billion. But the financial risk being forecast to come down so that our leverage ratio is 50%, that would certainly be an accomplishment well worth achieving. Okay, so here we have some comparisons of PepsiCo's, the trend in PepsiCo's results compared to rivals. And we can see that when it comes to sales, PepsiCo is larger than Coke and Dr. Pepper. And it's, let's see, it's also larger than its snack food rivals. From a standpoint of profit margin, Coke has the highest profit margin, and that's because it doesn't have businesses with high amounts of fixed assets, whereas PepsiCo has all of those Frito-Lay bakeries. So both Pepsi and Coke have bottlers, and the bottlers are the ones that own the assets that produce the cans and bottles full of liquid product. But in the case of snack foods, PepsiCo has to have the bakeries and the trucks and all the fixed assets to produce and deliver the product. No surprise then that with all those fixed assets, you're going to have a lot more overhead cost, and the profit margins from the bakery business are going to be lower than the beverage business. So Coke's profit margins are higher than PepsiCo's. What is a surprise is that Dr. Pepper, for some reason that we don't know, according to the value line analyst, is going to have a drop of profit margin. We can see that profit margins for snack foods are all over the map, but PepsiCo is superior. Notice the blue line, and that is Mondelez. Mondelez has been increasing its profit margins for some years, and according to the value line analysts, they're going to continue to do so, meaning that at some point, Mondelez could start wandering into PepsiCo's product turf, and you'd have a little battle on your hands. Rate of return on equity is essentially the growth rate in equity. PepsiCo is the leader, but value lines analysts think that Coke is going to catch up to them. We don't know why that's the case, but it would have to be due either to a reduction of equity through buybacks and lots of dividends, or alternatively, some very sharp spurt in earnings, which in fact happened last year. You can see the increase in the red line. Frankly, when you've got a return on equity of 60% or whatever it turns out to be, you know, I'm not sure why you would want to go past that. Rate of return on equity in snack foods, you've got essentially the PepsiCo's same line as the one on the left being compared to the snack foods, and you can see that it's harder to generate higher rates of return on equity in the snack food industry than in the beverage industry. Return on invested capital, PepsiCo and Coke are in lockstep, and in the snack food industry, PepsiCo is the clear winner. With regard to long-term debt, PepsiCo is bringing its down, and you can see that the analyst believes that Coca-Cola is going to sort of pull in its horns here. It's been growing rapidly with long-term debt, indicating that Coke's probably been doing a lot of acquisitions. In the snack food industry, PepsiCo certainly has a lot more debt than its rivals do. And yet, as we also see and have seen previously in the goals hierarchy, the intent is to bring it down. Leverage ratios, we can see the PepsiCo is headed down. Surprisingly, with all of its additional debt, Coke's leverage ratio, that is debt as a proportion of total capital, is projected by Value Line to come down. So they're pretty much in lockstep. Same for Dr. Pepper. With regard to snack foods, you've got essentially Kellogg, PepsiCo, the Frito-Lay division, and General Foods, all coming down, all generally at the same level. So I'm not sure that we need to go over these conclusions other than to observe that PepsiCo, it does intend to bring its leverage down and get its financial condition under better control. But at the same time, it looks like we've got some of its rivals approaching at least as healthy a condition as PepsiCo either is in now or intends to be. Let's see, is this somebody else now? 134. Okay, that's me. This is simply a chart that shows market shares in various markets and and product lines. So we see beverages, carbonated beverages, non-carbonated beverages, and snack foods. And I'll generalize because of the time, but PepsiCo, with a few exceptions, holds either a number 2 or a number 1 position. And its intent, depending upon where we are in the world, is to be number 1, with the exception of the very top line, where we see PepsiCo's number 2 in the carbonated beverage, the leader being Coke. And so its intent is to simply remain there. Non-carbonated, it's number 1, intends to stay number 1, and so forth. We can see that in India, it's number 2 in carbonated beverages and has the goal of being number 1, whereas it's not so ambitious in Latin America and Europe. In India, non-carbonated beverages, it holds a number 3 position. Its aspiration is to be number 1, and so forth. Snack foods, of course, they're pretty much the leader, except in India. At this point, we have a problem. We have now gone for almost 2 hours, and although there's not much of the presentation left, I think we, in the interest of being able to put this recording out to the rest of the class, we're going to have to end here and then reopen another. As a matter of fact, yeah. So we're going to stop. I'm going to stop the recording in just a minute, and then I'll keep talking. So for those of you who are watching this recording is going to end now, and we'll finish up with a short second recording. So here, we'll close it.